Okay, I'm going to be playing their intro, and then we can start right away. We're also going to record it to the cloud.
אני שייך, הלב נמשך, אני בוחר להישאר, הכל כדאי, אני חי בארץ ישראל. This is my home, this is the place to be, מרגיש את אלוקיי כאן בקרבי, אז תעלה אחי ושב איתי. This is my home, זה המקום שלי.
You're listening to the Bring Them Home Aliyah podcast, hosted by Josh Wander.
Welcome back to Bring Them Home. This is Josh Wander from Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. We are here today with a very special guest. His name is Rabbi Nesanel Cadle. Cadle or Cadle?
Cadle.
Cadle. Okay, Rabbi Cadle, we had actually had him on our live show this last week with Rabbi Lichtman, and now we're having him on our recorded podcast. And he has quite a story to tell. And I'd like to start from the beginning. I know that we already had you on. We spoke to you a little bit, but let's just pretend we're sticking to and we are an entirely different new audience. So let's start from scratch. Please introduce yourself, what your background is, and what you are doing today.
Okay, so yes, my name is Nesanel Cadle. I have a show right now in the Philadelphia area in a suburb called Yardley. It's a small show, about 60 families, 60 member families. And some members of my kehillah, a number of my kehillah, members of my kehillah now, and other people have contacted me about a desire to move to Israel, to move to Eretz Yisrael, and to have myself and my wife serve as the Rav and Rebbetzin for that kehillah. And this has been gaining steam over some time. And Bez Hashem, this summer, we will be involved in setting up the first 70 families of this kehillah, and then Bez Hashem growing from there.
Amazing. This is actually very prophetic. We know, first of all, I have so much to say, so let's go into it. First of all, 70 families is very significant in the Torah. The 70 families that left Mitzrayim and 70 families that are returning. And the Gemara says, La'asidin, in the future, that Bote Medrashios, Bote Knesios, they're going to be moving, La'asidin Likav'u Be'eretz Yisrael, that they're going to be repositioned in Eretz Yisrael. And I, when I was growing up, and I grew up probably in a similar environment as did you, as an American learning in yeshivas, we always learned that Gemara as thinking that this was going to be some sort of miraculous, sort of the al-kanfin isharim, being actually on wings as opposed to being on an airplane. We always thought that these yeshivas and these kehillahs are just going to pick up and they're going to uproot themselves. These buildings are going to fly in the sky over to Eretz Yisrael. But I think it's becoming more and more clear that this is happening, as the Rambam clearly says, that this is happening in a very natural process, that these shuls and these yeshivas are slowly but surely uprooting themselves from the Gullus, and they're coming to Eretz Yisrael. Do you see it the same way?
It's a hard question. I definitely think that we live in a time of Ikvasa de Mashiach, and that part of Ikvasa de Mashiach is this process of people moving from Gullus to Eretz Yisrael. Whether to say, it's above my pay grade to say that the halacha is like the Rambam versus the Ramban or others, but to say that there's clearly a lot of things that are going on which are extraordinary, and especially with regard to the settlement of Eretz Yisrael and a lot of nisim that have been involved with that, I definitely concur.
I wasn't actually going into the machlokas Rishonim between the Rambam and the Ramban, whether it's part of the Taryag mitzvos or not. just to say that things are happening, and I don't think the Ramban argues this question of whether things are happening in a natural way or happening in a supernatural way. In fact, the Ramban takes a more extreme opinion, point of view when it comes to Eretz Yisrael, where he, I think, is a Das Yochid possibly in this, saying that when one does mitzvos outside of Eretz Yisrael, that it's only begeder chinuch, that it's only for the purpose of practice for doing the mitzvos when they come here to Eretz Yisrael, and it was clear to him, and he was part of that natural process when he came so many centuries ago, and uprooted himself from Spain and his different moves that he made on the way to Eretz Yisrael, and restarted the Ashkenazic community in Yerushalayim. When he came here, there was very little to speak of here in Yerushalayim, but he came to Yerushalayim, he came to Hebron. He speaks in depth about his travels, and so I wasn't going into the trying to figure out what the paskin, the halacha of how we paskin. More to say that, and this is an important point, I think, that is, I believe that it is not well known or not well spoken of in American Orthodoxy, that there is a consensus across the board that there is a mitzvah today to live in Eretz Yisrael. Whether it is a chiyuv, whether one has to get up and move immediately is a question, and it definitely should be. Everyone should consult with their rav when it comes to that question. But once you've done that, once you've moved here to Eretz Yisrael, that in itself is a mitzvah. Okay, again, whether it's a mitzvah midrabanan, daraisa, whether it's part of the taryag or not, I understand all the different nuances here. But clearly it is a mitzvah to live here, and I think that's something. I mean, let me just go back even further. I understand that you learned in Telz, and yes. And that is very special. I actually have a personal connection to Telz. I used to go to for many Shabbos to Reb Chaim Stein Zatzal in Telz. I have a personal connection, and so Rev Gifter obviously was very, very passionate about his love for Eretz Yisrael. And you spoke about this a little bit on the show. How do you think that influenced you, or did it influence you, or was it something that maybe came from your family previous to that? Because in general, I could say that and this was also something that you discussed on the radio, you should see that show. But in general, I feel that most yeshivish Americans are somewhat indifferent. I would agree with Rabbi Lichtman on this, that they are somewhat indifferent when it comes there. So not that they're pro or anti, they're just that's not necessarily the first thing in their mind. How did you come up with this? Was this a recent thing? Did you grow up with this? How were you influenced to come to the ideas that you have today?
So it's a good question. I've thought about that, myself. Where's the motivation? I think certainly Rav Gifter's example was a strong one, and Rav Gifter talking about Avas Tzion, Avas Eretz Yisrael. I think that was a very strong influence. Living in Eretz Yisrael, we only lived there about 2 years, but the Eretz Yisrael aspect of living in the state of Israel, meaning the sense of Kedushas Haaretz, and the sense also that beyond even the supernatural plane which we're discussing and the level of Kedusha in Eretz Yisrael, but just on a very simple level, there's a lot more Torah and mitzvos going on in the state of Israel than anywhere else. And the level of intensity of mitzvah and avodah that exists in Israel cannot be compared to anywhere else. And beyond that, and beyond other things that we're seeing outside of Israel, there's a sense that a Jew is a fish out of water anywhere but Israel. So I think there's a lot of components to the attractiveness of a Jew from Golus moving to Eretz Yisrael.
Absolutely. Again, this is all part of the Torah is very clear. Ki mitzion teitzei Torah, that the Torah will eventually come. And if you even go to the yeshiva in Ponovich and Bnei Brak, you see how it says it on the wall of the yeshiva. It says that will be She'eritz HaPleita, that will be where the Jews will eventually wind up, and they will be collected. I see it as a clear fulfillment of many nevuahs that we're seeing today. But that question, I think that really gets down to the crux of the question of whether or not, first of all, I think that you're way ahead of most American Orthodox Jews, that you already see the light at the end of the tunnel. But what I'm saying is that I think that what is neglected, and I've seen this over and over again, that there are pulpit rabbis in America that can go through, as we just had a couple of weeks ago, a Parshas Lech Lecha, and speak about, and not speak about Eretz Yisrael. That they can actually have a drasha about the Parsha of Lech Lecha, which is mind-boggling to me, how one can go through Lech Lecha and not speak about Eretz Yisrael. But Lech Lecha, it means you go into yourself and your Yetzer Hara and fight, all different things that you can speak about, trying to avoid the topic at hand. But to speak about something that now you've made some and let's get into the nitty-gritty now. You've made some concrete actions, because it's one thing to understand that we're living in a very spectacular times, and that requires a certain switch in mentality. But to say that since we're living in these times and something has changed, something is changing, so therefore we need to get up and do something practical, something concrete. So that is something that, like I said, I think you're way ahead of most Orthodox Jews. Perhaps that's changing. Tell me what you think. Do you see yourself as sort of a forerunner for a futuristic movement of Jews returning home?
I think that my thoughts, feelings are shared by many, but there haven't been a lot who have taken the plunge, as it were. And I know of several Rabbonim who are looking at this kehillah and seeing whether it will work. And if it works, then they'll come. That's true for two major yeshivos. Two Rosh Yeshiva have told me that they would even consider moving their yeshiva if this kehillah takes off, and certainly sending their alumni. And a number of Rabbonim, one of a very, very large shul, have told me that if this works, then we want to follow you. But as it were, I am the guinea pig.
A good guinea pig, ashrecha, as they say. If you're that guinea pig that's able to succeed in this, there have been many other examples of kehillos which have attempted, some more successfully, some a little less successfully, but the mesiras nefesh that was done throughout the generations to move to Eretz Yisrael, whether it be the Ramban that we spoke about, whether it be the Talmidei Agra that came here, even in the past century, we know that people that lived here lived under incredibly difficult circumstances. They had to endure all sorts of difficulties, whether it be the draining of malaria-infested swamps, whether it be starvation. And the mesiras nefesh that was put into moving here was incredible. And today, I often say that we don't have that. We don't have that nisayon. Today, there is so much shefa here. Baruch Hashem, there is so much that we have here. I don't believe that there's anything that you can get elsewhere that you can't get here in Eretz Yisrael. And that comes with its own challenges. My Rebbe, Rav Hershel Schachter, just was speaking the other day, and he was saying how the Jews know very well how to deal with the nisayon of oni, but don't know very well how to deal with the nisayon of osher. After the emancipation, the Jewish people as a whole have gone through all sorts of challenges that we never had throughout our history. But that comes with all sorts of opportunities as well. And we have the opportunity today, perhaps an opportunity that has not been seen in thousands of years, for the Jewish people to return home. Half of the Jewish people have, as you as you mentioned, already taken the plunge, and the other half, the majority of which are in North America. And North America, it seems to be a very hard nut to crack, perhaps for that exact reason, because there is so much osher, there's so much wealth, and people are so comfortable in that galus that it makes it a very, very difficult change for them to even conceive of the fact that they're going to get up and they're going to move elsewhere. What do you think can be done to try to ease the people's concerns when it comes to that?
So I'm hopeful that something like this kehillah can really help. I really think that's what would be a big impediment. I think that numbers and numbers of people want to move to Eretz Yisrael, but the logistics of integrating into the state of Israel are not always so simple. Financially, it's not so simple. As you said, it's not Mesiras Nefesh that existed before. But financially, generally, it's not a wise decision. Person's finances are generally more secure here than if they would make that move. And I think there's a lot of cultural differences. Somebody put this to me recently, and I think it was very correct. American society puts a lot of value on self-reliance and not relying on the tzibur. And the state of Israel, in a lot of very positive ways, but it's very much the opposite. And it's very much, what can we do for others and do chesed for others? It's the self-reliance is not the same message there as here. That's just one example. There's a much larger expectation in Israeli society to live together. Israel is much closer to being a socialist country than the United States is. And I think that, therefore, culturally, it's difficult for Americans to adapt. And the more that Americans have kehillos, where they feel like they can take what they feel of as best of American culture and bring that to Israel, I think that will be the biggest impediment removed.
It's interesting because just in defense of Eretz Yisrael, in the beginning of the state, it was known that it was started by mostly socialists that started the state, and it was meant to be a socialist state. They started the kibbutz movement as such. And there was a time when a lot of Jews actually had to leave, and many of them left in the 50s, because if you didn't have a red book from the Histadrut, from the union, you couldn't get a job here. And that has definitely changed. It's the change definitely politically started during what they called the revolution in 1977, when Menachem Begin took over and the Likud. And that has continued until this day, where more and more industries have been privatized in Israel. And today it's much more of a capitalistic, again, for good or for bad, I'm not sure that's always a good thing, but it's much more capitalistic than it ever was before. And I've noticed in the past 6 months, the year during Corona, how they've really opened the gates, maybe not to American tourists, but they have opened the gates to imports. And there is an enormous amount of imports that are coming in, maybe also because of Shemitah, but the American products are all over the shelves today. You go into any store and you can see just shelf after shelf of American products, which I've never seen before. I mean, I've seen, certain stores in Renana and certain places where there's concentrations of Americans. You've seen, products come in and out, but they are just pouring in now. But let me just lead into another question, because, and I see that you mentioned it on the show also. There are many American Jews, I don't know if you would categorize yourself amongst them, that feel that the time to come to Eretz Yisrael is now, because, I stress the because, there are certain dangers. There is political and strife. There's Corona. The gates are closing. There's financial instability. There's all sorts of things going on which are shaking up the world, as we know. And perhaps that is the reason we should come to this. And I know that our organization is very, very careful to make it abundantly clear that that is not the reason why a Jew, we welcome all Jews to come home. But that is not the reason Jews should come home. Jews should come home because they realize the incredible opportunity there is to live in Eretz Yisrael, and that this is this is what Hashem wants us to do as a people. And I believe personally, and many of my circles believe the same way, that if you come here not for the right reasons, meaning if you come here because there's riots in the streets, or because it's unsafe, because of financial instability, because of politics, whatever it is, as soon as that changes, you might be on the next plane back. Your Aliyah may not be successful if that's the reason, that's the ulterior motive for you to come here. If you really have the right motives in mind, and you're coming here because you understand the importance of Eretz Yisrael, then that will really stick, and that will really, you'll have a successful Aliyah. What are your thoughts?
So I think that the majority of people I'm working with, and myself included, my oldest child is 18 and my youngest is 6. Historically, that's not a time that people would make Aliyah. Historically, that's considered a difficult time to make Aliyah. I think that there are a number of factors involved here. Everybody who's going, some have already gone, believe that Eretz Yisrael is a great place to live and they want to live there. But that there were a number of considerations which said, this is a hard thing to do. We would like eventually. It's too bad we don't live there. But they weren't ready to make that leap. And I think that what's changing is people are saying, if the United States is good to live in, then we'll allow that to be our place to live. That's where we're going to go. That's where we're going to stay because it's a good place to live. If the United States doesn't feel like a good place to live, then we will do what we would have liked to do, all things being equal, which is to live in Eretz Yisrael. I think that would be more accurate as far as the majority of people I'm working with. I don't think there's any concern that people will therefore come back. Number one, I don't think that there's any sort of perception that things are changing in the long term. And I think one very big piece, a lot of Jews focus on who's in the president's, chair, who's in the Oval Office. And that wouldn't be my focus. And I don't think that's the focus of most people. That could be debated. What's now, what's was, who's better, Leiv Melachim V'Sarim B'Yad Hashem. I think that could be debated. But what can't really be debated is that there's a significant shift in the United States ideologically to the left. And when that comes to economics, again, that's not my area. I don't, you could debate, Democratic policy versus Republican economic policy. I have no horse in that race. But when it comes to social values and civil values, and when it comes to the United States government as European governments, increasingly wanting to get involved in private school education, those are things that we cannot function with as from Jews. And I think that if there's a danger which is perceived, it's that danger more than anything, which is saying, really we would have wanted to live in Eretz Yisrael, and if we can't live as properly, and we're concerned about our ability to live properly as Torah Jews in the United States, then it's time to go.
Somewhat disturbing to me to hear that. I mean, not surprising, but a little bit disturbing. Again, it's this mentality of having to run away from something that, as long as we're comfortable here in Gullus, we're comfortable. Why not stay where we are? And that there doesn't seem to be a motivation to get up and move to where the destiny of the Jewish people is meant to move to. Instead, it's this mentality of we're as long as we're comfortable in Gullus, we're happy to be here, and only once something gets rather shaken up and we're not so comfortable here anymore, then we're going to have to find a better place, better greener pastures, and And if that is the case, then those greener pastures may be in Australia or New Zealand. Why come there? It's Israel.
Right. So again, it's as I said, these are people who said, all things being equal, we really would have loved to live in Eretz, so we want to live in Eretz Yisrael. But it's not a simple thing. It's not a simple thing. And again, culturally there are differences, economically there are differences. Family differences, people that have families, if their family is mostly outside of Israel, that make it difficult. So there are both factors, and what the percentages are is very subjective to each individual. But every person going is saying we want to live in Eretz Yisrael, but there were these barriers. And now we're going to say that those barriers, we're going to try to remove as many of those barriers as possible. And we're going to say that we're going to overcome those barriers because we don't feel comfortable. So it's both. It's not one or the other. Because as you said, otherwise we would go to, wherever it would be that would be perceived as safer to be Torah Jews. And I would stress again, it's this reason we're not saying that people who feel economically under threat. If a person is moving because they feel that they want to be able to be shomer Torah mitzvos, I think that those are remarkable people. And I think that those same people are people who are saying, we love Eretz Yisrael. The same people are not hardcore Zionist, as it were. Those people don't need this. Those people don't need this project. Those people have many places in Israel to move. But people who are saying, we really want to live in Eretz Yisrael, but there were so many barriers. We're not masse nefesh in that way, but we really do want to live in Eretz Yisrael. There are both elements in play.
So the question is really why they want to live in Eretz Yisrael. And if it comes down to understanding that a third of the Taryag mitzvahs can only be accomplished here in Eretz Yisrael, that even if it is like Rav Moshe suggests that it's a mitzvah kiyumis and not a mitzvah chiyuvis, still just like tzitzis and other things that we do, we understand that our goal in our lives is to perform mitzvahs in this world, and the place in which we can perform the mitzvahs, the most mitzvahs in the best way, is Eretz Yisrael. Where else can you perform the mitzvahs, the mitzvahs atluyas ba'aretz, all the mitzvahs that we're doing today? We have internally here, we have our PR that we have to deal with people that come here, or many Israelis that try to find all sorts of loopholes for not eating kedusha shvius and not getting involved in we try to find every loophole to import things from abroad and to buy it from the goyim and to do this because we haven't figured out yet exactly how it's supposed to be done. Hopefully soon we will figure that out. But there's enough PR that has to be done on both sides. I have a quick question. I know we have to wrap this up. How do you feel, if at all, that the anti-Zionist movement, Satmar, whatever you want to call it, the people that use the Gareta of the Shalosh Shavuos to explain why you shouldn't be living in Eretz Yisrael today, how has that affected, if at all, the mainstream yeshiva world in America?
So I think, if you will, there are excuses. You mentioned if this would be a different country, and in that country people could feel more secure in their Torah and mitzvos, those people, quote unquote, would go to that country. The complication in part is because we're talking about two things. We're talking about Eretz Yisrael, and even more so, we're talking about the state of Israel. The fact that we're talking about the state of Israel, there's a lot to be pointed to that people could say, it was founded this way, and this one fired on this one, and this one killed this one, and this one put this one in, Bedavka, not Shomer Torah Mitzvah schools. How could that be a good place? Those are the type of arguments that people will put forth beyond whatever the Gemara in Ksuvos that you referenced. So the fact that there are answers as to why not Israel will remain. However, I still think that if there are communities which feel comfortable to Americans, I think largely those are excuses. When in the case of, you mentioned Samer specifically, in their case, I believe that this is a deeply felt ideological point of view, and I don't think that's changing. But with those who use those viewpoints as excuses, I think that the more that there are communities available where they can feel comfortable and integrate into, then they will want to live in Eretz Yisrael. I think that most from American Jews would recognize that Eretz Yisrael is a more ideal place to live. But because of all the other factors, there are a number of excuses. And the less excuses there are, the more likely there are numbers of people, and especially as they feel less and less comfortable, to come and say this is really a place that we should have lived in regardless.
Tell us how we can connect to your project, where it's holding now. How can we connect to it? People that are interested, how can they contact you?
Okay, thank you. So right now, where we're holding is actually this week. We're sending several groups of people, lawyers, realtors, askonim, to look at properties that we're looking to purchase in the Afula area. And there's undeveloped land, there's apartment buildings, houses, boots on the ground is a word to look at things so that we can all get settled between Pesach and Elul. The majority of people will be coming between Pesach and Elul. Anyone who is interested in connecting, helping, learning more information can email me. That's probably the easiest. It's RN, like Nesanel, RN, CAD, like dog, LE, RN Cadle, @gmail.com. And a lot of people are already emailing me. I can, and then direct them from there. Yeah, but anybody who would like to be helpful or like to know more about the project, I would welcome their interest.
Amazing. And I want to reach out to you and say that we are here for you and other American Jews. I think this is probably a little bit controversial, but I think one of the messages that Hashem has given over the period of Corona, where the gates of Eretz Yisrael have been closed to American tourists, is that Eretz Yisrael is not meant to be a tourist location. It's not meant to be Disneyland or Cancun. It's meant to be a place where you come to live. And if you come to live, the gates have always been open for Aliyah, and we welcome everybody, and we're happy to help anyone who's coming. I live here on Har Zaysim. This is not just a green backdrop of mine, but this is actually where I live. We feel very privileged to live in such a special place in such a special time. I always tell people, I don't know what you see when you open up your windows in the morning, but we have a beautiful view of Har Bayis outside of our window. We feel so privileged. So you're always welcome. You and your kehillah is always welcome. If you have any questions, we have quite a few connections over here in the land, and we're always happy to assist in any way that we can.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for listening to the Bring Them Home Aliyah podcast. If you identify with our message, please subscribe and tell your friends about us too. You can leave us a review on iTunes, as that really helps us grow. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. For sponsorship opportunities and for all other inquiries, please email us at bringthemhomeisrael@gmail.com. Check out our website at www.israeltorah.org for more content on this vital topic.